Hey everyone, welcome to Drifting on Purpose, where we explore the ebb and flow of the uncertainties of life and how to authentically navigate them. We are your hosts. I'm Addie.
And I'm Azriel. Our mission is to cultivate a community of deep thinkers looking to take the path less traveled to uncover their true selves.
Topics range from authenticity, overcoming challenges, finding your purpose, and so much more.
We can't wait to share our conversations, our community, and our stories with you. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow along. Thanks for being here. Your support is so appreciated.
So, on today's episode, I am so excited to be interviewing a very close friend of mine who has been a pillar in my own healing journey, Dr. Susan Amorose. Susan holds a doctorate in medical QiGong and is a Reiki Master teacher with an extensive background as a clinical practitioner, instructor, and speaker. She combines both Eastern and Western perspectives and understanding to offer pathways to a more meaningful, integrated, and empowered connection to personal experience. Susan's expertise extends to consciousness and leadership, team development, and collaboration, including recognizing and honoring the feminine and masculine aspects of ourselves and others, making the most of our potential and human journey of awareness. So Susan's work has taken her across the globe, including visits to Japan, China, Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore. And we are so lucky that she's based in her backyard at Green Air's Holistic Health in Pittsburgh, where she sees clients from around the world and in person and virtually. So welcome, Susan. I am so excited that you're here. Today's topic is a little heavy, but I know that you're up for the challenge because you are just so wonderful. And our topic today is going to be about grief and just human emotion and how we can sort of shift through some of the darker aspects of our life and out and sort of clear our heads with energy and all that stuff. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor to join you, Addie and Azriel. I'm so appreciative and really excited.
Yay, thank you for being here. So excited too. Can't wait.
So I guess before we get started, Susan, would you mind telling our listeners who don't really know exactly what Qigong and Reiki are and what you do in your practice?
Sure. That's a question I get a lot. And I think if you ask a Reiki or a Qigong master, depending on the individual, you'll get a slightly different interpretation. So I'm always happy to contribute what my perspective is. And I've been practicing energy work or energy healing for a very long time. And probably the way by which some people first get into a yoga practice or Tai Chi is how I really started. So it was just a personal practice. I taught myself a lot from books and then later videos. And it really became something that I was empowered by. And it was part of my own healing journey. So important to say. Later on in my life, I had the opportunity to study with some really gifted teachers. And I took that opportunity, not really knowing where it was going, but feeling called. And because I think that is often at least a subtopic of what you do here in your marvelous show, an important part to mention. And so you can experience Qigong and Reiki as a recipient, and Qigong as an actual flow practice that you do. Reiki is specifically a healing practice. And in the lenses of yin and yang, yin being more receptive and passive, yang being more assertive, Reiki is a deeply yin practice. So someone who's attuned to Reiki energy can open to that frequency and deliver it to another person or an animal, even a circumstance, and alter the condition by elevating the frequency.
That's incredible.
And yes, it is. And energy medicine as a whole whether understood allopathically in classic Western models or in ages-old Eastern models from all around the globe, are underpinned by the same quantum dynamics and physics and piezoelectric systems. They just are. And humanity in different times and different places has always been able to connect to it in a way that affects a specific result. That takes you to QiGong. So Reiki is Japanese. QiGong is much, 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 much older, between 4,000 and 6,000 years old. The cave drawings that describe a typical Tao Yin practice are the same drawings that I was exposed to when learning. So it's very consistent and therefore proven. It comes from China, and it is more yang, although it's considered also a yin practice, because you're directing frequency, you're electing specific types of frequency based on your discernment as a practitioner. So you're making determinations. So somebody who has a mastery in QiGong most likely would be able to, and often does, deliver frequency based on their discernment or assessment of your conditions and the type of outcome that is preferred. And I hope that helps to at least distinguish the two for you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to have it be such an old modality and it's still used in today's world and is just an incredible feeling to know that these things are still being used and they're still working. And I love that you mentioned frequencies, because I think as humans, we experience emotion, and different emotions, at least I feel, have different frequencies. Is that correct?
For sure.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, the Chinese medical system, the Taoist model upon which that is based, and Qigong clinically as a flow practice as well, it specifies the frequency that each organ system in the body is aligned with. So actually, there isn't a separation. There isn't a compartmentalization between your feeling states and your embodiment.
Wow.
There isn't. And as we go a little bit deeper into the main topic today, blow your mind even more, because in the Chinese system, it truly is holistic, and it challenges a Western mind, particularly a very modern one, at first, as we step into that system and space. But it is a wonderful and tried and true, as you say, example of a holistic model, which can be applied again and again at the micro, macro levels and every level in between, to distinguish what it is we're experiencing. Look for the universality of it, look for the cohesive pattern that we each identify similarly, and from that place work with it.
Now, when somebody is going through Qigong or Reiki, are there any symptoms that they would feel, any sort of awakening in the body that they, or sensations?
Yeah, very good question. And yes, a lot of people may just feel altered a bit, maybe tired, maybe energized. Some people fall asleep. Some people yawn. Some people may say that they didn't notice much, and then a day later, everything seems to come to the surface. The important thing to realize is we are moving our vital life force, which is frequently referenced as qi in my system, qi Japanese, qi Chinese, and it really is the the vitality which animates our bodies while we're alive. So that life force, when it is in any way stemmed or challenged, blocked, diffused, we experience it as a feeling state. And it is there within that flow and the pattern of flow, as it is altered, either in the direction we prefer or in a direction we would rather not. That is the space within which we seek healing. And an able Reiki or QiGong therapeutic support will be able to support and shift that the flow, the frequency, the groundedness. I can get into that a bit more, and hopefully the balance or harmonized state of that person's electromagnetic experience, right? That flow of energy, that frequency.
That brings to mind, like, my first encounter with Qigong is just like a home practice. And it's literally just like hitting yourself. Like, I just saw these people just hitting themselves, their faces, their foreheads, every part of their body. And they do it every morning. And now it makes sense. You're literally activating your life force in some
Exactly. And you're releasing any congestion. You're creating a contraction or you're creating a vibration.
Yeah.
And you are shifting. And it is, Azrael, as simple as that. And if you ever come to a Qigong studio class, either virtually or in person, at my studio space within Green Arras and Aspinwall, please do. You will see that we do a lot of this.
Awesome. So fun. It feels so, it does. It really does feel activating, and there's some relief about it. It's pretty amazing. It's really
I
fun.
love that you have that background exposure and that you've done that.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, from personal experience, just through working with you, Susan, is that a lot of emotions that sort of bubble to the surface, like you said, they, for me, kind of came a day or so later. And it was like the floodgates open and I was just like a bubbling, crying mess. And, you know, that kind of segues into the topic of this episode is grief, and just feeling all this release and feeling all of this sadness and heaviness that just, and eventually, you know, you become lighter because you are releasing. But just having this space and holding the space for that grief to come, I feel like is something that is absolutely necessary in order to heal and move forward. But oftentimes people in today's society hold that in because either they're afraid to show vulnerability or it's too sticky and uncomfortable to sift through. And so, you know, they'd rather get busy working or working out or doing something. But what I found through personal experience is grief is always going to wait until you are done doing what you're doing to pop up again. And so what are ways in which people can work through that grief to move forward in their healing journey?
That is a big question, but I am going to bring it right into the space that everyone can identify with, which is the space of self, because that is where grief is for us. And there is such a thing as a collective grief. But for the most part, as we deal with separations, as we deal with the end of a relationship or the form of it, it could very often involve the loss of someone, or it could, more often than not, in our practical world, it's very often in a dramatic shift in the connectivity. So let me talk a little bit about it from that perspective, because that will help us deal with all of our emotions. And just to begin with, we don't really look at emotional states as positive or negative, they just are. And realize that our culture, and particularly, you know, our species, we do categorize it, right? We want to feel good and happy and joyful and content, and that's great. We want to set ourselves up for that, and we want to look at what potentially would block that, but we do experience everything else on the spectrum, and it's not because you've done something wrong or you deserve it because you have done something wrong or incorrectly. It is a state of frequency. It is, and it wouldn't be here to be felt unless it was legitimate. And this is important, lean in, unless it had a purpose.
Yeah.
Now, we all can make meaning from our trials and our triumphs, but literally, we're going into our connection with our creative intelligence as a lead in adaptation. We can decide what it is we want or how to react anyway. And we can do that toward a specific outcome of our choice. So that's the application of free will. And human beings have that possibility in their bag of tricks. And so often, though, we are separated from that connection to personal empowerment, that we have a role to play and it is creative, or as many people would say, and I like this word, co-creative. So when we are feeling grief, we are attuning to a frequency which is a manifestation of a dynamic that is happening. We are registering that something has altered, it is significant, and we are registering it in a generalized term as a loss. And if it creates grief, then there's a spectrum of profundity or totality in that. But nonetheless, what is happening at the level of frequency is that there is an enormous disconnect now. So getting back to QiGong, there is a concept which is a reality which was known as Wei Qi. We call it Wei Qi, again, that vital life force, but it's a specific type. And it's the cohesive, energetic intelligence matrix that surrounds all living things. Okay, the National Institutes of Health, once they were able to measure it and the committee came together and rubber stamped it, and I think it was the early 1990s.
Wow.
They call it a biofield. So we waited a while, but understanding it through that modern scientific model, we'd need to measure it. And then we'd need to look for the veracity of its continuity. So we know this east and west, that there's a field that surrounds us. It is connected to and through us. It allows us to interface with everything and everyone that isn't us. And it allows the everything and everyone, or the unified field, to connect to us. And that is extraordinary to even try to think about. That's why I said, prepare to have your mind blown, because
It's like you're like, boom.
and you're going, okay, but let's get to grief. I understand.
Yeah.
So when these frequencies surface and manifest, we hold within our actual tissue states and our subtle energy bodies the capacity to resonate, to attune to the frequency states of various feelings and emotions. So now we are registering and there is a reaction. So that, for example, grief, just as it could be joy or anger, for example, or fear, that grief has been produced by a dynamic.
Mhm.
We are having a reaction to an alteration, and that alteration is occurring outside of us. And it is being registered and processed by the Wei Qi, or the biofield. And it's reaching us. It's being transmitted to us. And so we are doing our job, which is in the unified field around us is doing its job, which is essentially responding to a new condition. And if it's a grief state, it's most likely a condition we don't necessarily desire, but it is producing a certain pattern that's universal. It is manifesting grief. So the end of a relationship is a grief, and it could be followed by a very long period of processing many griefs within that grief. But at the end of the day, it's an enormous change, and it's a loss of a very sacred connection. And that connection is one's Wei Qi with another.
Mm-hmm.
So when those connections are tried and strained and may be lost and must reform, or in the case of death, are in a state of completion,
Mm-hmm.
this energetic body and this matrix that connects us to all things everywhere in the universe is doing its job to adapt. And you are doing your job by noticing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the reaction to this shift. And I do believe that in the modern world, particularly in our Western world, we are compelled by a driving force forward, productivity, and structures that are external but not personal to us to keep going and move on. And so we are rushed through, and as you say, Addie, we find ourselves, in order to function, pushing it down. And it's fascinating that you use this expression, and so do most people around the world, not just in our English speaking culture here. We push down.
Mm-hmm.
Grief actually creates a descending impact on our vital life force.
Mm-hmm.
It sends it down from the lungs through the body, and it actually creates an accumulation of excess chi and frequency at our lower body. And remember what we said, everything has a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually serving to ground you.
Wow.
Because that is the best possible thing for you to do, because you have lost a significant connection to a significant source of your meaning, your life expression. Whether that's a job, whether that's a spouse, a loved one, in whatever way, a pet, a friendship, a community, this disconnect is registered by your biofield or your Wei Qi.
Mm-hmm.
The Qi, which is usually very radiant, ideally around the crown and the upper body, robust at lung and heart, and significant at the area of all vital organs in the torso, it actually comes in and down. And you, of course, are affected by that, because what a strange experience that would be for your vitality. But if you even think of the posture of people grieving, it's a reflection of a preserving cycle that is essentially a reaction to the reality and it will ultimately preserve you. And just to add, the best way to move through that is also the best way to move through anger or fear, etc. It is not to resist it. Because when we do, or we attempt to tamp it down and block it, you can do that in order to function temporarily. But attuning to the frequency allows it to adapt. We could use the word transform, and we can go back to what we had alluded to earlier, which is being a co-creator. You're working with what's at hand, the new condition, and you are registering your condition and what has changed externally.
Mm-hmm.
And from that place, grounding to the best of your ability, allowing yourself the support of Earth and its gravitational pull to hold you, to really allow you to stabilize, allow the way chi to stabilize amidst what sometimes is a very sudden or maybe a very long, protracted disengagement, but nonetheless rigorous, so that you can allow your energy to begin to ascend. The grief, as I said earlier, is stored in the lung, and the meridians or energy channels, pathways of the lungs go through, guess what? Our arms and hands. The way by which we connect and the way by which we let go.
Wow.
Yeah, so that energy has to come up for us eventually, but
Yeah.
it's a process.
Mind-blowing. Susan, your voice is so calming.
Thank you.
The way that you explain that, just the flow and the cadence of it, I was just like, okay, I can listen to you talk about this for a long time. What a beautiful explanation about Wei Qi, the unified field, and all these things. And it's helping me. I know we're specifically talking about grief in this instance, but just the interconnectedness of it all is just helping me right now realize my own feelings, my own emotions. And like, I have a choice. I can impact those as well. And I don't know, just hearing you talk about it, you're giving me a lot of power right now in your explanation. So thank you so much for sharing those things.
You know what I'm thinking of is just from the way that this podcast was born, we connected on our grief of divorce and a failed relationships and just working through co-parenting and just the daily grind that kind of comes with all that baggage. And through connecting through our grief, we had this inspiration to come up with a podcast to help others, find their authentic selves, find a path forward that felt more aligned with who they want to be. And it's all kind of like coming together. I feel like my mind is actually being blown right now because just through personal experience, this is instantly clicking with what you're saying, Susan, and it's pretty incredible.
I'm so glad to hear it. I did want to offer this thought from this Chinese model, which is when there is sadness, qi disappears. The vital life force eludes one. So if you realize that, and this dates back millennia, and it's in the medical texts, that there is an observation that the qi, your vital life force, becomes utterly elusive. Now, it doesn't really disappear, but as you know it, it is difficult to access. This is the same, let's say, with fear. Qi would descend deep into the kidneys. Anger, guess where your qi goes?
Oh yes, up and out.
Yeah, that's another conversation.
Yes.
That I never heard that before, of course. And it brought to my mind instantly, like, okay, so there's some people who've been together, like they're older individuals, right, of life. They're in their 80s or 90s and their spouse dies. And then shortly thereafter, the other partner dies. And for some reason, it just clicked in my mind to think, like, why does that happen? They're grieving, but they're not being able to access their chi, their life force. And they're not even maybe wanting to either. So, it's like, so that was profound for me. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course, of
Yeah.
course. I'm
Yeah.
so happy that this is
Wow.
resonating.
Susan, quick question for you, just for our listeners. What are some ways that they can incorporate grounding practices in their everyday life?
I love that question. That's probably one of my chief focuses. And from there, everything else actually follows. There are many ways to ground yourself. We know nature is a great healer. So if you're lucky enough to be outside when it's temperate, and if it's not, you are near images or lucky enough to have a nice window, connect in that way, but always feel where you are in the lower aspect of the body. So if you're seated as we are, begin to connect with what's supporting you. It's most likely a chair or the floor. And that chair's being supported by the floor, and the floor is being supported by the gravity of the earth. And once you yield very yin, you surrender to being held, to being compelled by gravity itself, and to be grounded by that. You're in a perfect state now to connect to that earth energy because you've spontaneously dissolved any resistance to it. And how often do we walk into a room or place our feet on the floor in the morning and think, thank you, floor, and earth that supports it. This floor was built for the sole purpose of holding me today and my chair and my bed, etc. But we don't think that way because, again, we're programmed to not quite be present, but forward focusing. And that's where we're pulled from what is the most life-giving connection we have, which is the stabilizing frequency of earth, which can ground us and nurture us and stabilize the Wei Qi field so that we can connect on this beautiful horizontal axis as much as we want. And of course, we can align with the opposite polarity, which is really what it's all about. That is that crown aspect, which in its ideal state is radiant and connecting upward to what the Chinese would call the heavens. And we can call the sun, we can call it the unified field or the cosmos. But I always like to remind people that if you ground yourself, you are like a ground to an electric current or a lightning rod. The more stable and deeper you're grounded, the larger amounts of light you draw to yourself because you become magnetic. You resonate with Earth, and Earth is inherently attractive.
Wow, it's so incredible and so well said. We are so grateful for you to be on our show today. There's so many good nuggets of knowledge here, and I think our listeners are going to be very excited to take this home and hopefully incorporate it in their daily practice. So,
thank you. It was an
thank you
honor.
so
Thank you,
much.
Susan. I know I'm going to start practicing some more grounding meditations in my daily routine here. So thank you so much for all of these words. So wonderful to have you.
It was a pleasure.
Susan, would you mind letting us know where our listeners can find more information about you and your workshops and where your classes are located?
I'd love to. You can visit susanamorose.com, SusanAmorose.com. And you can also find me at Green Eris on Commercial Avenue in Aspinwall, Pennsylvania. and at ghretreats.com. And there you'll find a listing of upcoming events and classes, as well as office hours.
All right, guys, thanks for catching up on another episode of Drifting on Purpose. And again, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment so that we can continue to cultivate a community of deep thinkers. We'll see you next week.